For the vast majority of my life, I had absolutely no interest in the creature known as Sasquatch or Bigfoot. About 7 years ago, that changed. Since 2018, the existence of these creatures has been at the forefront of everything I do. I've spent most of my free time working towards proving that they exist. I have absolutely no academic pedigree that qualifies me to do so. I'm not a wildlife biologist or a scientist of any kind. I do, however, have a lot of experience in the outdoors. I've hunted, fished, camped, and hiked my whole life. I am also a military veteran. But for the most part, I'm just an average American family man. If I'm being honest, all the time, money, and effort I have put towards proving that these creatures are real isn't for the purpose of advancing science or for protecting an unknown species. What drives me is something deeper. It's personal. So personal that my quest for the truth about these creatures has changed who I am as a person. In order to understand why I am so driven and why I take the subject so personal, we'll have to start at one of my main research areas. I have conducted field research all over the southern U.S., but I am a Georgia native, so the vast majority of the research I have done has been in Georgia.
What out of you? What out of you? Unspoken truth left from you. Slipped away, no more words for you. Take it back, no matter what you do. The truth, bleed it out. Face your boundaries. Our mission trudge through the mud of time. This truth casts shadows in the dark. Shadows in the dark.
This particular spot is what I consider to be ground zero. Just about all the activity that's happened over the years has happened within about 300 yards of this area. Some of the interactions that I've recorded in this immediate area over the past 2 years are going to be a little hard for some people to believe. But everything you're about to witness, everything you're about to hear, every story I tell you is 100% true. All right, just past all these logs up here is what I consider their hill. I hardly ever come up here except to leave chicken eggs and other gifts. When it comes to the habitat itself, this area is connected to several thousand acres of wildlife management area. It's got plenty of freshwater sources and an abundance of wildlife. So learning that they would choose a location like this to live wasn't a big surprise. But there is one aspect of this area that you can actually see from this hill that it's actually responsible for a lot of my determination to find and share the truth about these creatures. It's also responsible for some of the animosity that I hold towards the institutions that have been hiding the truth about these creatures for years. If you look past the creek and up the hill, you can see lights. Those lights are from my house. In order to understand what it's like to live your life pretty much in the middle of a Sasquatch habitat. It's probably best that we start with one of the first pieces of video evidence that I ever recorded. Hello. Did you hear that? Hello. Hello. Maisie, leave him alone. Leave him alone. Maisie, leave him alone. It's okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my garage/office. As of right now, I'm a member of a Sasquatch research team. We do field research called the Sasquatch Encounter Brigade. I also do a podcast called Sasquatch Unredacted. 5 years ago, I didn't know the first thing about these creatures. But the video that you just watched, I was standing on my driveway 25 feet from where I'm sitting right now when the Sasquatch growled at me. Now, there's no way to know exactly where it was at, but judging by the sound, it was 40 feet from the house, which means it's about 40 feet away from my children. And that is why I've taken every bit of this so seriously. It's not the only time that's happened. That was actually the third time I'd been growled at. We're going to dive in to the audio from that video and show you some very interesting things. There's more than one growl involved, but I'm going to show you a lot of these audios from video. I've gotten a lot of evidence over the years. My house sits in kind of a hole back in the woods, about a quarter of a mile off a gravel road. I have two neighbors. One is about 150 yards in front of my house, and another one is about 75 yards on the side of my house. Before we go through this audio, I'm going to take you all the way back to the very beginning. And just kind of walk through exactly how all this started. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the very beginning before I started documenting things. Number one, because I like to show evidence for the information I give. But it's important to understand just how all this started and how I got to the point where I even started looking into Sasquatch. I went from, the only thing I knew about the topic had been from my interest in UFOs. If you look into enough UFO stuff, eventually you're going to run into Sasquatch stuff. I'd seen, the TV shows and a few documentaries, but I never took it seriously. I might have thought, yeah, who knows, it could be real, and that's about it. But this all started with the activity at my neighbor's house. And those neighbors don't live here anymore, unfortunately. So I'm not going to be able to show their property for privacy reasons.
but 99% everything has happened directly on my property or the wood line we share behind the property or whatever, so that's not a problem. But I'm going to walk you through how all this started. Around 2017, 2018, I'm not exactly sure because I wasn't documenting anything for almost 2 years. The family that's 150 yards away from me, they have a teenage daughter, and they have a neighbor, and there's a teenage boy that lives in that house, and their family. It started out with very simple things that seemed like teenagers messing with each other. Thought maybe there was a problem at school or something, and there's a group of kids picking on them or something, but it was basic stuff like beating on the side of the house late at night, throwing rocks and sticks at the house. But eventually this stuff kind of escalated. It went from beating on the house to throwing rocks and sticks at windows. Because they've got a family member that works there and they're not shy about calling them, they would call the sheriff's department like once every 2 weeks. And the sheriff's department would come out here and look around. Well, eventually there was a rock thrown at the teenage boy. And there was a witness. His grandfather was with him. They're walking down the driveway at night and he gets hit with a rock. Shortly after that, something happened at the house. Again, I'm not sure exactly what it was. The adult came running out of the house and heard running through the woods. So he goes to the back of this property, goes on a trail that you guys are going to get a look at. So he goes around the corner on this trail, and about 50 yards away, he said there was a very large man in all black standing in the middle of the trail. And he yelled some profanities at the very large man, and the large man just stepped off into the woods. And then that was it. And that's when the alarm bell started going off with me. So anytime something would happen over there, after that, I started responding or trying to help. Something would happen and I would run over there with a flashlight and a gun. Where things kind of started to change for me, one, I started hearing strange vocalizations at night. It was like Native American war cries. At first, I thought it was connected, that maybe it was human, but the vocal range was just way out of like human range. It didn't make any sense. Like the closest thing I could come to was maybe a coyote, but it didn't even really sound like a coyote. It was very strange. But then one evening I heard gunshots, and I got my rifle and I went over to my neighbor's house, and he said somebody had thrown an object at the window. I can't remember what it was, a rock or a stick. He came outside, shot into the ground a couple times as warning shots, and that was pretty much it. And he called the sheriff's department. Well, I was there with a gun, so I didn't want to be standing around with a gun when the sheriff showed up. So I walked back to my house, and there's a wood line that separates our properties. And I went and took a knee in that wood line with my rifle. And I'm just watching over him and listening. And he's standing out in the middle of his yard like this, just kind of waiting. And all of a sudden, from the wood line, from about 60 feet away from where he's standing, there is a stick that's probably about 13 inches long and about as big around as my thumb, comes flying out of the wood line and hits him dead in his chest. He screams, turns around, runs towards the house, falls going up the steps because it scared him so bad, runs inside. And when I saw that, it really kind of clicked that something's not right here. This isn't really the actions of a teenager or even really a man. Like to throw a rock at a house and then hide in the woods and then have the gunshots and then come back and then throwing a stick at the person with the gun just didn't make sense to me. I think that's really when it started to click. Then things started happening over here more. It would usually happen when the dogs would start barking. I would come like the first night. One of the first weird things I remember is the dogs were barking. I came to the same area in my driveway from the growl video, and there was these pallets right there next to my fence, and I stood up on the pallets and I shined my flashlight, and all of a sudden I heard a loud knock, like a whack. It was like a baseball bat hitting a telephone pole. And I could not for the life of me figure out how in the world a human being made that sound. That was strange. Shortly after that, the same thing. The dogs came running to the same part of my yard, barking at the fence towards the woods. I walk out there. I've got a flashlight. I shine my light, and I hear bipedal footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I shine my light, and the footsteps stop. I turn my light off. It starts walking again. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I turn my light on. It stops again. It does this for I don't know how long, maybe a minute to 2 minutes. But it did that all the way until it was out of earshot. It never changed pace. It stopped every time I turned the light on and started again as soon as I would turn the light off. That was strange. But when it all changed is when I got stubborn and I got aggressive because I wanted answers. I was actually home for a while, for probably 9 months, because I had a rotator cuff surgery and a disc replacement surgery. As I was recovering, I would do nightly armed patrols. I would grab a rifle, a flashlight, and just head out in the woods. And if there was anything, I'd already started learning a little bit about the creatures. I'd started listening to podcasts, reading books, watching interviews, putting two and two together. Like I'd hear things in a podcast, and then it would wound up happening here, or I would have something that happened here that I would hear in a podcast. And all these things were getting closer and closer and making more and more sense. At the same time, I'm thinking, there's no way in the world that's what this is. But I was out of answers. Human just didn't make sense anymore. So I'd learned about stick structures. So while I was out on these nightly patrols, I would just find things that kind of looked like they were made. And to this day, I don't know if they were or not. I would just pull them apart or break them or kick them. So I did that for, maybe off and on for maybe 2 weeks, something like that. I'd do a couple nights in a row and then take a break or whatever. It wasn't really a schedule, but I did it a lot. Well, one afternoon, I'm actually working in the yard on my kid's treehouse. And I get done maybe an hour and a half before dark. I sit down on my front deck. I'm drinking a cup of coffee. And on the side of my yard, past the treehouse where I'd just been working, there was a tree about this big around that just started shaking. And this is, an hour and a half before dark or before sunset. Plenty of light during the summer. And the tree's just shaking like this. So I jump up and I run out there, but I can't see the bottom 10 feet of the tree because it's downhill. I run out there. I don't see anything. I don't hear anything. And I'm like, what in the world was that? So I decide right then and there, I'm definitely doing my patrol tonight. So it gets dark. I get my pistol, my flashlight, and I've already gotten a thermal camera by that time. So I open up my front door. My dogs run out and they run straight to that side of my yard. So I close the door and I hurry out there and I go through my fence and go to the top of the hill where there is a trail that splits my property and my neighbor's property. It runs right down the property line. And here's a walkthrough of what happened. This is the night that I found out these things were real.
All right, there's my house. And I came out of my gate right here. And I made my way up to the top of this trail. I made my way down this way. And I got to right here. And rocks started falling all around me. Like somebody just picked up a handful of rocks and threw them up in the air, and they landed around me like 360 degrees. When that happened, I thought I had my answer. I thought, all right, this has got to be a person. So I backed up to the top of the trail again. I stood there looking around, had a gun, a flashlight, and I'm shining all over the place. I don't see anything. I don't hear anything. I make my way back down the trail again. I get to this same spot and the same thing happens. Rocks start hitting all around me. Well, at that point, it kind of makes me mad. And I yell out, "If you hit me with a rock, I'm going to shoot you." And again, I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. So I start making my way down the trail. And I came down here and I was looking around and listening, trying to see if I could find anything, see anything or hear anything, and I couldn't. I got around here and I just kind of spun around with my pistol in my hand and my flashlight, just looking around everywhere. And that's my neighbor's property, so I'm not going to go over there, but I made my way inside that tree line. There's a little trail over there that just runs inside the tree line. And I made my way in. I looked around in the woods. I came back out. Nothing happened. So I made my way back up to the very top. And I'm standing here. Those trees were a lot smaller. But I'm looking over in the opposite tree line across my neighbor's yard. And I'm using my thermal camera. And I'm standing here in the dark, just looking around with the camera. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, all of a sudden, from right over there, where that big boulder is, it growls at me. Just like the growl that happened on my driveway. It went, "Roar." Right then and right there, I knew what I was dealing with. Now, I was so scared that I had the thermal up to my eye and I couldn't move. All I could do was barely turn my head from this direction, just enough to get one eye in this direction over here. And again, I didn't have the light on, flashlight wasn't on, and I just waited for a few seconds. I just figured there was going to be an impact. I didn't know if it was going to attack me. I didn't know what it was going to do. After a few seconds, nothing happened, and I said, "All right, man, I get it. I'm leaving." I stood there for maybe 30 seconds more, and then I backed out.
I learned some very important lessons that night. Number one, these creatures are real. Once I heard that thing growl at me, there's just no way around it. And believe it or not, it was actually felt kind of relieved, because at least I had an answer. And the answer was not, "Hey, I've got a human running around my property at night," So having that answer really allowed me to focus on, wait a second, there really is a species of creature that lives in the woods around here that I never thought existed. And I was instantly, I was fascinated by this fact. The other important lesson I learned: I was walking around those woods with a gun and a flashlight, actively looking for this creature. I'm trained in situations like that. The fact that this thing got within 30 feet of me and growled after I'd been out there looking for it for 10, 15 minutes, knew it was there. It actually warned me by throwing rocks at me. I knew it was there. I knew I was looking for something. Now, then again, I did think it was probably human, but for it to be able to get within 30 feet of me and growl like that, it just showed me where my place on the food chain was. That there was just no way I was going to run around in the dark chasing this thing and think that I'm going to get the upper hand. And that was very important. You know, that would come in handy later on in my research. Also, it wasn't violent. I don't think it was happy. I honestly think that growl was basically an introduction. Hey, this is what I am. And the ball, I considered that meant the ball is now in my court. And honestly, for the next couple of years, it felt like everything that happened around here was kind of a test, kind of a getting to know you type of a situation. Shortly after that night that I was growled at, maybe a few weeks later, maybe a month, I don't know, I got growled at again for the second time.
Now, I'm doing this during the day because you need to understand just how little cover these creatures actually need. I came home from work one evening. I parked right here, gate's right there. I went to get out of my truck, and the second time it growled at me, it did the same thing and went, "Roar," from just right over there in that wood line. And you see there's very little cover over there. Well, I closed my door and I called my wife and I said, "Hey, there's something out here. It just growled at me. I need you to bring my pistol to the front door and just wait for me. You know, I don't want you to come outside, but meet me at the front door with my pistol." It took about, I don't know, it took a year for me to actually start telling people that story because it scared me. It did. I mean, I hung out my vehicle for a couple of minutes until I was comfortable with getting out and going into the house.
That was just another reminder that, you know, hey, I'm still here, and hey, this can happen at any. That's what I was learning, is they were in control of all this, that they could come and go as they pleased. That's what I started to learn. So let's dive back in to the audio from the night that I was growled at, and then we'll move on to some more evidence, because as more things started to happen around here, I started to be able to record more evidence. Now, I missed a lot. There's a lot more that happened that I wasn't ready for, but I started to learn their patterns. And a lot of times what was happening is they were giving me a warning. And I'll go into that in a minute, but they would do something to alert me or my dogs and then do something else. But you'll see some of that in a minute.
So I've taken the audio from the video where the creature growls. It actually does a couple of vocalizations. Now, what I've done, I've done a basic denoising of the entire audio. Then I amplified it. And then I went back in to this particular spot where you have the main growl. I amplified it. I I tone the barks down a little bit, but other than that, that's it. The original audio will be made available to anybody who wants it, but this is just for recording purposes. Now, the initial growl or vocalization.
Hello.
Crazy.
Did you hear that?
Now that is not my dog. That is the subject. This area is my dog barking. And then you're going to get this, and then what sounds like a stomp. I believe that's a direct response to my dog.
Maisie, leave him alone. Leave him alone. Maisie, leave him alone.
Now that is another growl response to my dog.
Maisie.
After the original night that I got growled at, things kind of took a turn. At first, it was super simple stuff. Movement in the woods. He would break now and again. The dogs would run to the fence like something was out there and I wouldn't find it. And then there would be a noise or a bang or, sometimes like something would hit the back of the house, but nothing crazy. Where I noticed a change is with the dogs. The creatures were they started throwing objects, not at my dogs, like to my dogs. It's almost like they were trying to get them to play. I was actually standing on my front porch, and my dog was down at the bottom of the stairs. And I heard a rock hit another rock. And I looked down and I watched as our stone comes sliding in, like on the ground, to stop right at my dog's front feet. And the dog looked down at it, picked it up in its mouth, kind of whimpered, dropped it, and then walked up on the porch. And that was pretty mind-blowing. In a way, a little unsettling. Just to think of like where the throw had to come from. Obviously from the wood line. And to be that accurate, I mean, it bounced. It hit, I've got this big rock that sticks up in my front yard in a couple different places. And it hit the rock and bounced and slid to stop right underneath my dog's front feet. which was, it's just mind-blowing, really, to witness something like that. Now, I didn't watch it come out of the woods, but that type of accuracy was impressive. It was also, it kind of changed things a little bit. It seemed playful. That would happen over the years a handful of times, maybe 4 or 5 different times. I finally kind of got it on video. Now, this jumps ahead a couple of years, this particular video, but it basically highlights, it's one of the only times I've captured it on video, and I did not capture the actual object flying through the air, but something had happened. I walked down to the driveway again, almost in the same spot I was before with the growl video. This time I just sat down. I wasn't even really ready. I had the phone on recording, but I didn't even have it pointed out. I'm sitting there and I hear a stick land in my front yard, again, hitting another part of my yard where that rock sticks out. And I turn around and look, and my dog runs up to where that sound, where I think it landed, and it playfully like swipes at what I think is a stick. And it's super obvious it's reacting to whatever just hit the ground over there. And then you hear my other dog, you don't see it, but you can hear the other dog in the background run over to me in that area. This would become a theme over the years, where it seemed like the Sasquatch were intentionally trying to get the dog's attention. I had heard, just like other people have heard, keep your dogs away from these creatures. They will hurt them. They do not like dogs. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I honestly think they were testing to see. It's almost like they were trying to build a relationship with them. And eventually, my older female, she's the one that alerts me when they're around, the same dog that you heard in the growl video. So she's been around through that whole process, and these creatures have seemed to included the dogs in this whole interaction thing. Again, I think testing to see, what's this human going to do with his dogs? Is he going to let the dogs out on us? Maybe. It's all speculation. I don't know that for a fact. But it's just very interesting that they would take the time to do that. And what's really interesting to think about is, what are they doing when I'm not here? And the dogs are just outside. I may never know, but it's pretty interesting. So here's the video. You will hear the stick land, me turn the camera that direction, and then you'll see the dog react to the stick.
Stick just landed in the yard. Did you see my dog? Did you see that?
The cat and mouse game would continue. There had been things going on during this particular week. I don't think I'd recorded any of it. It's just something happens, and I react pretty much. And I just, on a whim, one night I went down to the same area where I got growled at, and I squatted down there on the driveway at the corner of my house, looking into the woods, and just started talking to the woods, just saying, hello, are you there? And just whatever, just doing things that would make normal people feel like an idiot if anybody was watching. Thank God nobody was watching. Just trying to get a reaction. It was just a guess. Like I had no idea if they were out there or not. I took my phone and I started shining it on myself. Said, hey, do you see me? Blah, blah, blah. And eventually, after several minutes of doing this, there was a sound. Now, to me, at the time, it sounded like an aluminum can being crushed. I don't know if that was exactly what was going on or not, but that's what in person it sounded like. So I went and got an aluminum can out of the trash and came over and crushed it myself. I walked over to the fence, like messed around with it, talked to the woods. I think I threw the can over my fence. And, you know, a few minutes passed by and there is it's the very first obvious wood knock that I actually recorded. And it's super obvious, very awesome that I recorded that. I had developed kind of a rule by this point. I wasn't chasing them. I felt like I made a mistake by being too aggressive at the very beginning of all this, only because I didn't know what I was dealing with. Once I did realize what I was dealing with, I became curious, and from that point on, I toned down the aggression. So when things would happen, I got in a habit of just staying in my yard or staying on the porch or staying in my what I considered my area, you know, have a buffer in between me and them, hoping that eventually I would get them on video or record something amazing. Now, I kind of broke that rule that night. I didn't really chase them, but I did go get a flashlight, left my yard, went out in the woods and walked over to the area where I initially thought I heard them. It's actually the same exact location where I think they were at when it growled at me a few months before this. I get out there and there is a stick stuck in the ground, a single stick, with another one pointing directly at where I was just standing on my driveway. It's only speculation. There's a lot of speculation when it comes to stick structures. Possible, there's people that believe these creatures break trees and limbs to mark their area, their territory, directional markers. The fact of the matter is there's no way we can actually know that for sure without long-term observation. But one thing I do believe in, and it started right here with this incident, is they at least use single sticks or branches to mark locations for whatever reason I do not know. Now, as a human, I try to look for human answers, and to me, it's like, okay, this guy's out here, he's talking to the woods, and we haven't done anything yet. So somehow he knows we're out here. And I was standing right here when he started talking to the woods. So we can't come over here because he saw us. Is that really what happened? No way of knowing. In fact, when it comes to a lot of research, you're just trying to make sense of things without having all the information. And sometimes you got to kind of guess to put puzzle pieces together and you know, try to get ahead of them, try to figure out a pattern. The fact of the matter is, with everything I'm showing you now, video I'll show you, thermal imaging video I've got, unless I see the Sasquatch, I can't 100% tell you that it was a Sasquatch. But there's a lot of things that I've recorded over the years that I would bet my paycheck on. That's how confident I am in a lot of this stuff. But that's the first time where they used the single marker stick, and that's something that will be repeated later on several times, where things would happen, I would react or catch them. I'd go out there and there'd be a single stick either stuck in the ground, leaned up against a tree. There's other incidents that are really pretty awesome when it comes to the single marker stick thing that we'll get to. But here's the video.
See me? Maisie, come here. You get over here. Leave him alone. Holy, I just crushed a can. This wasn't out here. All right, I am in the area where I think they were standing. And in fact, I'm 99.9% sure. And you'll see on the video from last night, but here's a stick stuck in the ground. And if you look right in there, you see where the white stuff is right in the middle? All right, so I'll stand up, you can even see it better. Where the blue is right there, I was to the left of the blue. So they had a perfect line of sight from right here. It's pretty cool, extremely obvious. And I don't know. You know, I've found other stuff like this before. I don't know what they're marking. They're marking something though. Maybe it's just a good vantage point to see me from. You know, that is not evidence in itself that it was a Sasquatch, but I don't know what to tell you. It is what it is.
A year to the month from when I was growled at the very first time is when I had my first sighting. I spent 9.5 years working evenings. I work for the same company now, been there for over 13 years, but 9.5 of that was working nights. Like I said before, I get home around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and after I'd been growled at and the activity ramped up, I spent a lot of time outside on my front porch or out in the yard or whatever. I'd get home, unwind, eat. Everybody else would already be in bed, so I would spend the majority of the evening until the, wee hours of the morning, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, just waiting for something to happen. And I'm just sitting there looking out across my yard at night, and after all this time, this running around trying to catch it and chase it and figure it out and everything, it just walks right down the middle of my driveway. And it just goes like right in front of my house. The way I was able to see the creature is because my neighbor's house is, it's a big white 2-story house. And they would keep all their lights on, their outdoor lights. As I'm looking out towards their house, I see the creature, full body silhouette, walking down my driveway. It's like in the movies when you see a full moon and the werewolf stands in front of the moon. That's what it looked like. A full body silhouette from the ankles up. It just walks out in front of my neighbor's house. I see it. I actually, probably out of shock or just to get a better look, I stand up to get a better look at it, and it turns facing me. And if you've listened to podcasts or read books or whatever and gotten witness statements or listened to witness statements from other people, there's a very common phrase, a very common measurement that people use, and that is that the width of the creature a lot of times is 4 feet wide. And that sounds fictitious, sounds too big to be real. It's not. It's 100% real. The creature that I saw from shoulder to shoulder, very close to being 4 feet wide. Now, it wasn't super tall, maybe a little over 6 feet tall. It's hard to tell from that distance. When it was walking down the driveway at first, I could see its right side. And I could see its chin sticking way out, like a huge chin. And it had what looked like 1980s rock band hair. You know, I can't see any detail because it's just a silhouette, but it looked like it had a lot of hair on top. And when I stood up, it went from me being able to see its right side, it turned towards me, its upper body turned directly towards me, and that's when I saw the width of it. And what was weird, if it's walking and you see, I saw the right side, I could see its chin and all that, and then I stood up, it turned its upper body like this, but its legs were still going in that same direction, like down my driveway. And then that was it. About maybe 6 seconds, I saw its entire body. And it turns, and then it's gone.
All right, unfortunately, I can't show this at night because those neighbors do not keep their lights on like my old neighbors did. But you can at least get a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about during the day. It was right there, and it walked right down my driveway. So it was completely backlit by their house right in here.
Now, I find it very hard to believe that what happened that night was just a mistake. I don't think the creature just messed up. I think it's a very good chance that that creature did what it did on purpose. It wanted me to see it. It's kind of hard to describe just how good these things are at moving around at night, being close or in the same general area as humans, and moving around at will, only being detected when they want humans to know they're there. The one thing that the sighting did was convince me that I had a chance at actually getting these creatures on video. So the next step I took was to purchase a very high quality thermal camera. And it would only be just a matter of maybe a month or so before I got my first opportunity to try to get these creatures on video. Now, what you're about to see is not going to prove the existence of Sasquatch. I can't say 100% what I recorded that night. But there are definitely some things that convinced me that what you are about to see is possibly a juvenile Sasquatch looking at me as I'm filming it, and then running and getting behind a tree and peeking around the tree. I was sitting right here on the night that I had my sighting. Just like numerous nights before the sighting,
and numerous nights after the sighting, all the way up to present day, the activity started with me coming home from work, getting a cup of coffee, sitting right here on my front porch and just waiting for something to happen. Well, eventually, after the sighting and after I purchased my new top-of-the-line thermal camera, I was sitting here and there was an object that was thrown through the trees that landed in my yard. It came from that direction, and my dog, that one right there, jumped up and ran to that side of my yard, and I followed. So that's the same side of the property that I got growled at that very first night. I come walking out here with my thermal, and I see right in here, it looks like it's a heat signature. Kind of looks like a face. Now, there used to be a lot more saplings and limbs in that area. And what happens is when I spot it, I'm trying to move this direction because I want to be able to see right down into the clearing right in there, hoping I can get a good look. Well, as I'm shuffling, I'm moving left to try to look down that clearing, and right before that clearing gets visible, it runs that direction, and then there is obviously something that looks like it's looking around the side of that tree right there.
I see you.
So the tripods are in the general area where I was standing when that happened. And as you can tell, all this goes downhill very drastically. Depending on its height, I think it was standing probably either here in this area, and there's the pine tree right there, or it could have been even further back, but there's the tree that it was behind. Now, The thing about the heat signature is it's not super hot compared to the tree, so I don't think it was peaking from right here really close to the tree. I think odds are it was further back, which if that's the case, it drops down pretty drastically right here, which would make the subject my height. But again, there's no way to know. But in the comparison shot that I did over here, I was actually standing all the way down here. So where my head lines up with its head, this is where I'm standing. But then again, there's no way of knowing exactly how tall it is, because as you go uphill, it's going to make the creatures shorter and shorter. Now, one of the reasons why I believe it was them, number one, is because it started with an object that was thrown. Number two, just like the video you guys already saw where the stick was left in the ground, I came out here the very next day and there was a much bigger stick than this. But there was a stick leaned up against that tree. Now, so what? It's a stick. The thing about it is, it was from where I had cut down some of these saplings. It was obviously cut on the end and been laying on the ground for a while. And somehow it was leaning up against that tree.
So that video, without context, it means absolutely nothing. I mean, to be honest with you, and I try to be very upfront. Now, as we go, the thermal videos that I've recorded over the years get a lot more impressive, a lot more convincing. When it comes to this one, do I think it was a Sasquatch? Yes, I do. But only because of the context, only because it started out with a throw of an object into my yard, and I went out there the next day, and there was the stick that was leaning up against the tree that I had cut myself several months before that I know was laying on the ground. Now, you can't ignore stuff like that, because what I have found is there are other things that showed up around here physically that I can't prove that Sasquatch did it, but I do believe that they are doing it. Before I even started documenting anything, I found 3 very large dead trees shoved into the ground. They were about that big around. They were all about 4 feet tall, and they were in the ground 10 feet apart. So one was shoved in the ground. You go 10 feet, there was another, and then another. So that's 3. Back then, I had no idea what I was looking at. I was kind of getting the idea that maybe I was dealing with these things back then. Tried to figure out whether they fell out of a tree or not. What I did realize that was very strange is somebody didn't come out there and dig a hole and then put these trees in the ground and then fill the hole back in. Because I found the leaves and the pine straw were laying on the ground like this, and the tree came down and forced everything into the hole because it was sticking out on the edges like this. And they were probably 3 or 4 inches into the ground. I could not physically do that. There's no way. And they were, I mean, there's symmetry to it. There's a pattern to it. There's 3 of them perfectly spaced. I would see that again later on the night after I was growled at the very first time. Go backwards a little bit. So the night I was growled at, I went down the trail and I walked into that small pine thicket. There's a small trail that goes into the pine thicket. It goes to like a little circular area, and that's pretty much it. So when I was looking around back there, I walked into that thicket and walked out and then walked up the trail. Then that's when I got growled at. The next night I went out there again, and on that trail going into that pine thicket, I found 3 rocks right in the middle of the trail. Now here is another really obvious to me example of rocks being left in threes. I had started setting up a blind, a deer blind, 3D see-through blind. And I was sitting in there night after night with my thermal imaging camera. And I did that for a couple of weeks. Nothing happened. So I took the blind down. I went out there a couple of weeks after that, and this is what I found.
We talked about the rocks in threes. Now, I haven't been back here in, I don't know, let's say 3 weeks or so. And I have these 3 rocks right here. Now, how do I know these rocks weren't here before? Because this is exactly where I had my blind, my pop-up blind, 3D, or my see-through blind, where I was using my thermal night after night during the winter time. That, and I come back here all the time. And this goes, not only do you have the 3 big ones, 1, 2, 3. I've got these little ones that haven't been here for very long. Now, a couple weeks, possibly, probably. That one hasn't been here very long. It hasn't even sunk into the dirt at all. That one. This trail leads right back up to where my chicken coop is. My chicken coop's right up there. All right, Jackson, explain what is going on here.
We left these rocks in a pile and we came back and now they're lined up. A messy pile.
In one night, these were the rocks that were laid out in threes that went up that trail right there that I found, I don't know, a week ago. We came out here because some of them were quartz and we were looking for rocks to use for arrowheads. So we put them in a pile and started going through them. We come back up looking for more rocks, stopped by here, and now they're all lined up like this. I don't know what to make of that.